Jazz here. Today I am doing yet another round of 5 book reviews. So I'm going to review 5 more books today, and I'm almost caught up with all my book reviews, so it's super exciting to be doing this video right now. So today I will be reviewing Caleb's Story by Patricia MacLachlan, Stardust by Neil Gaiman, To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo, Far Rockaway by Charlie Fletcher, and Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Bronte. I have left the timestamps for each of these books below, so you can either watch the entire video if you wish, but you can also just check out the book review that you are interested in as well. So check all that stuff out, and let's jump into the book review. Starting off with Caleb's Story. This is the 3rd book in the Sarah Plain and Tull series, and it is a shift in narrators. So the previous 2 books are written from the perspective of Caleb's elder sister, Anna. This one is written from Caleb's perspective. Anna has given him a journal, and he thinks that he doesn't have anything to write about, but it just so happens that this particular winter, a mysterious family member shows up at their house and ends up staying with his family. And his father, Jacob, has a lot of trouble dealing with this because of his past with this family member, and everything kind of rolls off from there. I've really enjoyed reading this series. This one was a little bit different because I hadn't had this read to me or anything before. The previous 2, although I recently read them on my own, I did have them read to me by teachers in grade school, and so I was a little bit more familiar, I guess, with how they were written, whereas this one I hadn't had read to me at all. I'd only watched the movie adaptation of this 3rd book, and it is very close to that, but you know, of course, reading it is a totally different experience. There's things added and taken away in a movie, so it was fun to just experience it on my own. I really like that it does change to Caleb's perspective at this point in the story, because I think it makes it really relatable to the age group that it's geared towards. It keeps it in the middle grade range for the most part, because at this point Anna is becoming a teenager or a young woman, and so it's nice that we switch to Caleb's for that reason, solely because what Patricia MacLachlan does really well is that she is very good at writing from a young person's perspective and making things seem very true to that experience. And it's kind of my favorite thing about the books is that I really like seeing how young people view adult experiences and relationship and seeing that through their eyes. And I find that the most intriguing thing about these books so far in the series. Something I also really enjoy is that, not unlike the previous 2 books in the series, it is very good at exploring darker topics without it becoming too dark or sad or depressing, because it is written from a young person's point of view and how they're viewing it, and they sense emotion sort of different than an adult would. Sometimes you just want to study the concept without being overwhelmed by it, and I think this is a really good book for that. I really enjoy that this book explores a lot about taking responsibility for your previous actions and about forgiveness for people that have done wrong to you and how you can learn to forgive people. I think it's a really nice lesson for young people and adults and everyone in general to just really think about, you know, owning up to your mistakes and forgiving people when they have owned up to their mistakes. Not unlike the previous 2, highly recommend this book if you're into checking out some middle grade reading. It's very quick and easy to read. I gave this one 5 stars, and I'm really excited to read the next 2 books. I think there's 2 more books in the series because I knew nothing about them. Next up, we have my reread of Stardust by Neil Gaiman. This is the story of a young man named Tristan Thorne who is really trying to get the love of a young woman named Victoria, who is sort of cold to him, and he decides in order to do this that he will travel into a fairy-like land and retrieve a fallen star for her, but things do not go quite as planned. I have reread this many times. I actually have an excerpt reading of this book somewhere on this channel that I will link you to if you are interested in that. And it's definitely one of my favorite books in general. I really like the element of the fairy world and how it mixes in with the real world stuff. It's funny but dark at the same time. It's a nice blend of things. You can get a nice solid laugh out of it, but there's also some, creepy isms. I am personally a sucker for the hate to love trope. I think it comes from reading Pride and Prejudice as a youth and also watching a lot of Shakespeare as a youth. So I feel like this book has that type of relationship in spades. I think I like those types of relationships sometimes in books solely because it supplies a lot of funny, witty dialogue and a lot of snappy dialogue, and I love a little hint of sarcasm in my life. And this has all that with the relationship in this book, and so it's everything. This was the first time I'd listened to this book in audiobook. It's read by Neil Gaiman, as I said in my last 5 book reviews, because it also had a audiobook in it that was read by Neil Gaiman. I love the way he reads his own books. He just knows how to tell his own tale, and it makes me super happy and puts me in a good mood. So I will say the exact same thing with this book in terms of it. However, the audiobook, at least the one that is on Audible, does have an interview with Neil Gaiman at the end of it, and I had a lot of fun listening to that interview, even though I think it was a little bit of an older interview, but it was fun just hearing his thoughts on the book. Now all I have to do is get the original graphic novel version of Stardust and read that, and I will have read Stardust in every type of edition that it is in. As for the audiobook and the book in general, I gave this one 5 stars yet again. Next up is To Kill a Kingdom. This book is a loose retelling of the Little Mermaid story, but instead of a mermaid being the focus of the story, it is a siren. There are 2 perspectives in this book. The first one is the perspective of Princess Lyra, who is a siren. Every year for her birthday, she has to take the heart of a sailor, and she chooses to take the hearts of princes. So she becomes known for that particular, I don't know if you call it skill, particular taste in hearts, if you will. The other perspective in this book is Prince Elian's. He is somewhat of a reluctant prince. He wants to do his own thing. So most of the time he's being a sailor, kind of being a pirate prince, if you will, with his closely knit crew, and he hunts sirens. So when Ilian and the recently lost her singing skill Lyra meet, insanity ensues. I ended up liking this quite a bit, and I'm really happy that I did, because I won this book during the final Bibliothon a little while ago. Was it last year that it was the final Bibliothon? But anyway, I won it for the makeup challenge, and I really wanted to like this book because it's one of the first things I've ever won, like ever. So I am happy to say that I did enjoy it for the most part. The first thing that I really did enjoy about this is the spin on the story itself. It has some nice nods to the Hans Christian Andersen original fairy tale of the Little Mermaid without it getting too depressing, because Hans was a sad man and most of his stories are sad, including Little Mermaid. There are also some nice nods to other renditions of the Little Mermaid, which is quite fun to pick out and see how those things have worked. Particularly though, I like the spin that Lyra doesn't actually lose her voice entirely. She can still speak, but sirens of course have a special song or way of singing that can draw in their victims, and that is the skill that she loses. So I thought that was very nice because her and Ilian could still talk to each other, and it made it quite a bit different for that reason, which I really appreciated. I also really like that this is a tale of high adventure and travel, so there's lots of action in it, lots of swashbuckling and mountain climbing and different types of people that are being introduced and just a general sense of high adventure, like I said. So that was something I was particularly in the mood for when I picked this book up, and it met my goal in terms of that. On that note, though, I will say that this is more of a plot-driven book than a character-driven book. Now, usually I prefer a character-driven book, but in this case, I feel like the plot was interesting enough that it was worth letting go the fact that it's not as character-driven. I think the characters are good enough that I enjoyed them and cared about them and wanted to know what was going to happen to them. And the plot was so, adventure-like that I was willing to let go of my usual preference. The only semi-negative, I guess I would say, on this book is that I did feel like some of the world building in this could have been better executed. It's not bad world building by any means. I just think you could have made it really great, well thought out world building, and this world building is just okay. It didn't take away from my enjoyment of the book too much, but it is something, because of the type of book that it is, that I did notice more than I should have, if that makes any sense. Like, you shouldn't be stopping and going, oh, that doesn't make as much sense as I want it to during a read like this. And so I think that was the only thing that kind of made the book not 100% a 5-star book. Other than that little qualm, I had a really good time with this book. I would still recommend it. It's a quick, easy read with short chapters, so if you want something that's fantasy but not too high fantasy, it's definitely worth giving a go, and I gave To Kill a Kingdom 4.25 stars. Then we have Far Rockaway. This is the story of a girl named Kat who, in the beginning of the story, her and her grandfather become involved in a horrible accident, and thus she becomes of two minds during the story. One is her fighting for her life in our normal real world, and the other half is her in an adventure landscape that is full of the stories that her grandfather has told her. I want more people to read this book because I flipping loved this book. I didn't know what to expect from it, and I was just like, oh, and it made me tear up a little, guys. Like, that's saying something about this book. This book does use a lot of references to classic high adventure stories, mostly The Last of the Mohicans, Treasure Island, Scottish folklore, and some Three Musketeers in there. I kind of wish I'd known more about Last of Mohicans and Treasure Island than watching like adaptations forever ago. I wish I'd actually read those books before reading this, but it's not going to take away from your enjoyment if you haven't read any of the books that I just mentioned. Obviously, of those books, I've only read Three Musketeers, and I still enjoyed it immensely. And there's enough in here to explain things or that you would know from pop culture that you're still gonna know what the book's referring to and talking about. I would say my favorite thing about this is that it's a nice mix of sort of family, domestic exploration of what's going on with Kat's family, and also an extreme high adventure story. I really like high adventure things. Who knew? So it does have lots of that action, mountain climbing, swashbuckling element, just like the previous book did. But it's nice to see how that's juxtaposed with sort of the family drama that's going on and the things that the family has to work through while Kat is fighting for her life. And it's very intriguing to see how the things cross over, how certain things happen in the real world, and how they affect Kat's dreamscape elements. And I really thought that was super clever. This book also explores a concept that I really, really love, which is the love of story and the importance of story in people's lives, and how we are kind of our own stories, and how also books and different stories can really inform our life and change our lives in a lot of ways. And I really thought it explored that concept in a really excellent way that just brought joy and a little bittersweetness to my heart. As you can tell, this book was bomb. Loved it to pieces. Definitely check it out because it's not a well-known book, and I gave this book 5 stars. Lastly, let's chat about The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. This is a story about a young man named Gilbert who is very intrigued with a mysterious young woman named Helen who moves into the rundown property that is Wildfell Hall with her son. A lot of rumors start going around about her, and thus Gilbert becomes conflicted about whether he should give in to his feelings of admiration for this woman or just leave it alone. I, first of all, really endear myself to gothic romance. I don't read a lot of romance, but I like classic book romance, and gothic romance can be super, super fun because it's kind of dark, but also romancy. And this one fit the bill for that. Now, the main thing that I find interesting about this book is that it does explore some really dark topics that I can't believe she got away with in the time when this was written, because it does explore abuse and alcoholism and all sorts of crazy, crazy things, and it explores it in, I feel like, a really genuine way. And it also explores types of abuse that aren't physical, so mental abuse, emotional abuse, and things like that. And I feel like those are just as valid as physical. So I think that is a really intriguing thing that Anne did with this book. I'm also going to jump for joy because I don't always enjoy epistolary novels, and this one is an epistolary that I highly enjoyed. I think I find myself enjoying epistolaries where I can feel like the author really wrote the perspective from that character. Like the character feels like a real character. It doesn't just feel like a generic letter, if that makes any sense. And I think in this, Anne Bronte was successful with that element of the story. I must say, too, that Gilbert and Helen are my new classic literature ship. I just adore them with all my heart. I think it's something about the like single parent and non-parent relationship, like how Gilbert genuinely seems to, enjoy spending time with Helen's son just as much as he does with Helen, and it makes my heart just feel good. And then I'm like, oh, the cuteness is real, y'all. It's just cute. I also listened to it in audiobook format. I will put a photo of the audiobook that I chose to listen to right here, but I really enjoyed that format. It had a male reader read all of Gilbert's sections, and then they had a female reader read all of Helen's sections. So it was quite nice to just kind of hear that in your ear. I will say, as I mentioned in a vlog that included a lot of the books that I've done in this video, that this audiobook does have a few paragraphs and things that are missing that are in this edition of my book. Not sure if that's because of the edition of the book that I have, or if I misread something and it was somewhat abridged. I don't think it will affect you overly much if you do like I did and you read the book at the same time as listening to the audiobook. Obviously, when I did that, I could just pause the book and then read what wasn't included. Also, I don't feel like if you don't read it along and you are missing those sections, that it's going to overly affect your experience of the story, if that makes any sense. The missing sections just tend to add a little bit more insight to a certain thing, but they don't take away from the impact of the story. I hope any of that made sense. So this was another one that I freaking loved, and I also gave this one 5 stars. Lots of 5 stars, again, in this video. I'm on a roll. Those were my 5 book reviews for today. Drop me a comment below if you have any thoughts on any of the books that I talked about in this video, or just to say hello. Really helps out the channel when you do. Leave me some comments, and if you want to like and subscribe if you're so led, please do that as well. Thank you all for watching, my fabulous peeps, and I will see you all soon. Bye!